Because if you look in it, and I could pull up a figure, what we see in New Hanover County is, lots of parcels, lots of land acreage that with sea level rise is becoming at issue. And just right now in 2030, there's an estimate of like $500 million of land. By 2030, there would be $500 million worth of infrastructure, housing that would be at risk with sea level rise.
Welcome to Shoresides, where we explore the coastal North Carolina region's past, present, and future to promote community resilience. I'm Nicholas Magno. Eagle Island is a mostly undeveloped piece of land that connects Wilmington to the east and Belville to the west by highway. It's home not only to a number of unique species, but also plays a key role in North Carolina's history. This important landmark is facing threats not only from the inevitable march of climate change, but also from people who are looking to develop the area into an even larger tourist attraction. We'll speak with Roger Shue, a senior lecturer on Earth and Ocean Sciences at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, to learn more about the dangers that Eagle Island is facing and how local interest groups are working to protect the legacy of this vital piece of North Carolina.
Eagles Island was also called several other things back in the 1700s, and the island has been used for multiple different things. One of the earliest uses was for rice cultivation in the early 1700s all the way up into the 1800s. It's an area that is definitely mostly a swamp terrain. Lots of freshwater grasses, but now changing to partially brackish water species, which is important to the story that we'll talk about with sea level rise and other. And the other thing with the island, it's been looked at quite a while and had quite a history. It's also a maritime historical site. There's multiple different ships that are wrecked as well as parked historically on the east bank there of Eagles Island. We have a rich maritime history in Wilmington. And in fact, there were shipyards on Eagles Island back before the Civil War and during the Civil War, whenever the ironclad North Carolina was actually constructed on Eagles Island. So this has been a major area for marketing, for naval stores, for rice, and also for many other products. It was kind of a location where areas to the west, such as Brunswick County and others, would bring goods across the island, and then they would be brought across the river via ferry into Market Street, downtown Wilmington.
The rising sea levels are causing a number of environmental changes to Eagle Island. These changes are causing the local ecosystem to shift in unprecedented ways.
The things that we're seeing with sea level rise, climate change, is the fact that coming up the Cape Fear River, waters are rising. In fact, over the last 25 years, sea level has risen up the Cape Fear River about 7 inches. And what's happening with the river right now, the seawater is coming further and further up the estuary, and it's converting some of those freshwater grasses to brackish water grasses. So that's related to primarily the saltwater change that's occurring in the area. Part of that's obviously with sea level rise is associated with climate change, such as with the heating of the oceans. You raise that with anytime you heat water, it expands, so thermal expansion is occurring. Also, the melting of the ice is leading to some of those. In our area, we've increased about twofold of what our sea level rise was back in the 1990s at about 1.7 millimeters. And today, just at the gauge that we have at the bridge here in Wilmington, which is one of the longest operating gauges in the United States back to the 1930s, that gauge has provided us with information that shows, again, that sea level rise rate has somewhat, it's not doubled at the site, but it's getting close to that. So we're seeing some drastic changes up the river. We now have blue crabs coming up the river past where we have the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, and of course historically that did not occur.
With the sea level rise comes the formation of ghost forests, which occur when plant life changes to accommodate more salt water entering their systems, transforming what once was a forest into a marshland. This is happening in forests across the state. While Eagle Island is further south than other occurrences of ghost forests, the phenomenon has the same cause, the dredging of the Cape Fear River.
Eagles Island is in that same vicinity. It's only about a half mile south along the river from Smith Creek. The area that we're looking at here has seen the changes, and the changes that we're seeing in the Cape Fear River are dominated by the deepening of the Cape Fear River. It started deepening in 1871. They wanted to get the area, even though some of the river was up to 20 feet deep, there were also some shallows. So in 1871, they did their first dredging. That effectively got us to about a 12-foot water depth in the Cape Fear River. And since that time, it's been a series of deepenings of the river, or dredging of the river. And the last one that was done was in 2000 to 2005, where it was deepened to 42 feet water depth. And of course, that's done to try to bring in larger container ships, up the Cape Fear River. We're currently at 42 feet. You have to dredge it to about 44 feet out into the ocean, about 7 miles, because it's not going to do you much good to dredge the river if you don't also have that deep water out in the ocean. And of course, one thing that happened with that deepening, we've seen it every time, but this was a significant point. We started seeing some major die-offs at that time. And one of the ones I wish I could show you the picture is on Town Creek, where in 2003 there were rich cypress and bottomland hardwood forest in there. By the time you see the 2023 data and look at those changes, most every one of those trees in this particular stretch of the Town Creek, which is a tributary to the Cape Fear, those trees had died, become ghost forest, and converted to a grassland area. And it's the Sinosauroides, Spiralis Sinosauroides, which is the freshwater marsh grass.
Climate change isn't the only threat facing Eagle Island. Companies have taken an interest in it due to the island's status as a tourist destination, but few proposals take the environmental reality of the island into consideration.
One of the things, we call it the West Bank, and the West Bank has been looked at for several years now for possible development. I believe in looking at it that it's a really poor thought to do that, particularly when you're seeing upwards of 160 to 180 days a year with water on the road that goes to the battleship in some form or other. In some cases, inundation that occurs is really dramatic, upwards of more than a foot on the roadway. So obviously that's an ingress and egress issue for getting in there for safety with any kind of development. But the area to the south of the battleship is the area that some people have looked at potentially developing on Eagles Island. The latest one was a proposal last year, though nothing's been done with it, is the thought of putting in a 6-story hotel and spa in the area. And of course, when you look at the data, as I said, you really see the kind of folly of doing anything like that. It would be almost impossible to have a safety road going in and out. You'd have to treat stormwater in a special way for the area because you are right there at sea level, basically. And in those multiple times where you get the water coming, up onto the road, it makes it problematic for any kind of development.
Meanwhile, existing tourist spots have learned how to cope with changes in their environment.
So we have a different vision of what should be done there. And the battleship is doing some of that right now. It's called a project, Living with Water. And what the battleship has done is their project is ongoing right now. They've got much of it completed, but they have another phase later. But what they've done is raise the parking lot 2 feet and put in new stormwater management. such as constructing wetlands in the area. So their idea is to live with water instead of fight water that you would have to do a development. Now, of course, that doesn't get at the answer of the roadway. That still would need to be raised because the battleship has to shut down sometimes during the year now because of high waters.
Shoe and the Eagle Island Task Force have a new vision for Eagle Island. It is one that will leverage the island's interesting features while also being mindful of the changes it is experiencing.
So our goal is to do something different on Eagles Island. We have an Eagles Island Task Force that we developed. It's now a nonprofit. And what we're trying to do is say that instead of doing big development, we would raise some of the areas, such as one building that would be kind of an educational site, and then we would have walkways and roadways that if they flooded, it wouldn't make really any difference. So you don't have any big harm if the water comes up over a road where people formerly were walking or biking or something like that. Our goal is to put something like ecotourism for the area, but also to highlight all the beneficial cultural, historical, and environmental things associated with the island. For instance, I mentioned the rice culture that's been going there, was very, very important. There were 3 rice plantations on the island, and there was also processing of naval stores. So what we'd like to do is highlight that history of rice, naval stores, and the maritime history for that particular area. It's a really major site to show how Wilmington and surrounding areas developed over time. And particularly with the rice culture, with all the canals and ditches that connect up to the waterways, I've also looked at putting in or designing 3 or 4 different paddle trails that we could have as part of the Blue Way kind of idea of communicating or moving around the island as we go.
Eagle Island has undergone some big changes, and while that could scare people off from wanting to do anything with the land, Shu believes that accepting the reality of Eagle Island's environment is the key to its success.
One of the things that happened after Hurricane Florence in 2018, which was our Helene of the day. In Hurricane Florence, we had some of the highest flood waters that we have, but not the highest. And so what we saw during that time was, the issues associated with flooding. As it turned out, there was a insurance group called the Zurich Insurance Group that came in after that and looked at the area, looked at, things that happened, interviewed guys on the battleship and different places around the community. And what they said in, moving through that area, what they said was that, we should look at where risk actually occur. And what we should do is disincentivize development in any of these high-risk areas. It kind of makes sense, but at the same time, a lot of people don't look at that that way. They actually look at things and say, well, we can design something that we can really make it work. And so we're arguing with the commissioners that kind of has sway over that area. What we're doing is saying that you should look at this area and think about things that, recognizing risk, we should make decisions that most effectively doesn't harm the community, doesn't involve environmental damage, and doesn't lead to issues with cost.
From Shoresides, this is Nicholas Magno. Learn more about Shoresides at shoresides.org. Thank you for listening.